I can't tell you how many times being selfish could have saved me a lot of heartache. Now, do I regret the things that I went through? Absolutely not. It was, failures. It was a valuable lesson that I learned that I needed to go through.
Before we get into the podcast, guys, I want to make a big disclaimer. In no way, shape, or form are my co-hosts and I or any guests that we have on a replacement for a mental health specialist. We do not have the credentials for a mental health specialist, nor are we trying to substitute a mental health specialist for you or anyone else who may be watching or listening to the podcast. We are simply just guys on the internet sharing their experiences of things that they've gone through and what we have done to be able to push past them in a way that can hopefully inspire, lead, and motivate, and let today be a better day for you guys than yesterday. And as a reminder, if you do want to catch the live segment of this podcast, don't forget to stop by our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/thinktheory. We are live with the podcast every single Monday at 6:30 p.m. EST. And if you want more content, check out our YouTube channel, also under the Think Theory name. We post there weekly, and I hope you guys enjoy the podcast. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Think Theory Podcast, episode number 4, with your host, Brayan, and of course, our co-host, Nelson. You guys know what it is. Today, we have a good topic. Actually, this is something that for those of you who have been some OGs, already know that I've created a YouTube video on this, but I felt like this topic could be talked more and really elaborated on, and that is restructuring failure. And some of you are like, what does this even mean? Oh, failure. I genuinely love... Okay, I'm just going to rip off the Band-Aid right off the start. I'm just going to say I'm not the type of person. I don't believe in failure. I do not believe... I don't care who it is. You cannot convince me that failure is not a thing.
Oh, boy.
Yep, we're getting right to it. We're ripping right off the band. Yeah, we're going to... Like, you cannot convince me. You can't convince me. You just can't do it. You can't. You just can't.
What is a life without failure?
Okay. So let me,
I mean,
all right. So let me elaborate on exactly what I mean, right? So
right.
You guys, obviously, all you guys know that, you guys know my history. I throw it out there. I'm very open about it. I come from a broken family, survivor of sexual abuse. I deal with the pornography addiction. I'm very transparent. I suck with money. Well, used to. I'm better now, but nonetheless. And I have all these different failures that I've had and encountered in my life. Many things and avenues that I wanted to go down that unfortunately did not come out the way that I planned to, And for lack of better words, from an external perspective, even myself, I thought they were just failures. That's it. Done. But as I matured and, was seeking counseling and everything, one thing that I really learned is the biggest lessons that I've ever learned, the things that have actually created a transformation within myself have been my failures. I've learned lessons from things that I've succeeded in. Nothing has actually ever taught me more than failures have. And I am a firm believer that no matter how bad you fail, and there are some times that people fail really hard, that you can't do anything to convince me otherwise. And this is kind of stubborn. This is getting straight to the point. But you just can't convince me otherwise that there isn't a lesson to be learned from failures that can not only be beneficial for you, but for other people. Now, failures are opportunities for sure. And I definitely think that... Now, I will say there is I think you have to have the mentality to be able to view it that way. You definitely have to have some kind of level of I would say self-awareness. We talked about that before. If you guys want to check that out in the previous podcast and stuff like that, go ahead and check it out. But I definitely believe, I think that there is definitely a certain mentality that you need to have to be able to take that opportunity or take failures as an opportunity and learn from them. Back then, like I said, when I was going through it, I definitely was not in any way, shape, or form like, oh, wow, look what I learned. I was like, great, God hates me. Why me? Fine, I'm serious. Yeah. I questioned everything. I did not even learn anything from it, at that time, because my mindset was a very pessimistic mindset. I was full of nothing but negativity, and at that time, it's just like I questioned everything in a negative way. What about you? What's your thoughts on this? Do you think that... What are your thoughts on failure in general?
Well, failure, in my mind, in my personal experience, failure is when you mess up at something and you don't learn the lesson. So we kind of have the same mentality. And for the longest time, I used to think of, like, just like you, a very pessimistic point of view as to towards my failures and whatnot. I was like, why am I going through
Kind of
this?
questioning everything.
Yeah, and at the point of sometimes even like losing faith in my faith.
Mm.
I've been tested, but the real because honestly, when you mess up at something and you do something wrong, I don't see that as failure. I see failure as not understanding the lesson of why you messed up and it didn't succeed. I don't see, oh, you didn't do it wrong, that's a fail, or you did it wrong, that's a failure. I don't see that as something as that should be labeled as like the failure of, like, oh gosh, the shock value of the word failure.
Right, right.
You just messed up. You did it wrong. But what did you learn from it? If you didn't learn anything, that's a failure. That's
See,
my point of view.
I think so here's why I still stand in the ground that I just don't believe that there's such thing as failure as other people see it, is because oftentimes when we fail, those are moments in our life that, generally speaking, we're not going to forget. And that's, I'm kind of speaking very broad on it. There are some people that do forget it. It is what it is. But I think, generally speaking, most of the time when you fail, it's an important lesson or moment at some time that or that you're going to remember. Especially if there's a strong emotional reaction that's created from that. Your brain's you're gonna connect that a lot better, and it's gonna be able to stay in your mind for a lot longer. And why I say that is because even though you didn't learn the lesson there, that doesn't mean that you can't learn that lesson down the road, years down the road, And I don't know. I mean, I definitely think that not everyone can learn lessons. You fail, and at that moment you learned it. For me, I can certainly tell you that, like I said, I wasn't able to do that in the beginning. As I developed my self-awareness and really started understanding that every single one of my failures has a lesson to be learned from it. Then with that mentality kind of moving forward, I definitely was able to, oh, wait a minute. If I do this could happen. What am I going to do then, to kind of think more critically? And even if I do it and then go ahead and fail with doing that, like, I still learn a lesson at that moment. I don't learn it most of the time now. I don't have to take 2-3 years to learn it. However, there are many lessons that I still have yet to learn, and that's kind of like, I don't know, I just feel like my past, we all have so many failures. We all have so many different things that we'll struggle with at some point in our lives. And like, I just kind of have this thing where I go back into the past, not because I'm living in the past, but because my brain is kind of connecting these dots that I never was able to connect before. And it's like, the more that I do that, the more that I'm now training my brain to think that way, And the reason why I specifically call this episode Restructuring Failure is I just believe that society as a whole has this negative connotation, I guess is the word, with failure. Like, you fail and like they like shun you. Like, instead of encouragement, you're like looked down upon. Like, especially in school, something nowadays. Oh, don't even get me started. Nowadays with school, the importance that they place on grades. Maybe not everyone is good test takers. That's completely fine. Not take that same person and put him in like probably like a room where it's more dependent on interaction and participation and like the effort that's put in. I guarantee you they'd pass, because there's a lot of people that don't have, I can tell, I'm a terrible test taker. I don't know about you. I'm a terrible test taker.
Same.
I don't care how much I had to like make songs and melodies. I had to like study twice the time, something. And I can tell you right now, when I was in school, like, I had decent grades, but that wasn't always like that. And the most of the time, like, it was definitely like, I felt like crap. Like, my mom was upset at me. Like, you go get put to the school's counselor. Like, hey, listen, your grades are kind of slipping here. We need to figure something else. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to graduate, and like, I don't like that, and that's just kind of where I feel like we need to learn to restructure failure. And as it was mentioned earlier, it's a chance, an opportunity to help someone like push past their limits.
It's true. And honestly, failure may not even be the person's fault. It may be, in this case, we talk about school, it may be just a bad instructor. It may be just a bad situation. It may be, in this case, we talk about school, it may be just a bad instructor. It may be just a bad situation. It may be just a bad situation. It may be just a bad instructor. 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 It may be But someone under payroll, it's just, oh, well, we're going to support the teacher. It's the student's fault.
Right.
It's actually, there's more to it than that.
Right.
Maybe it wasn't the kid's fault because, like we mentioned in the previous podcast, it's understanding is subjective. So how that person is able to absorb information, that varies between person to person.
True
so
that.
maybe the failure doesn't solely belong to that person.
Right. I
So I
think,
agree with you. We got to restructure it because not everybody can be taught the same way,
right.
or not everybody can go about the failure the same way.
Well, I guess more or less restructuring meaning the meaning that we actually have behind it,
Yeah.
So like, because I don't know if there was someone that would have encouraged me a long time ago when I failed and I stumbled and I wanted to keep pushing forward, but I just had no idea how. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not meant to. Like, I feel like those are like tools that I feel like should be developed and focused on at an earlier age, And granted, not everyone has that. Not everyone has parents that are there, that are present, or able to be there. Unfortunately, some people come from really broken households and stuff like that, But I feel like if we placed an importance, and I think it's not this black and white, of course, especially relating to school. Let's just say, hypothetically speaking, making it black and white for the sake of conversation, that we did put an importance of how it's okay to fail. And even though you're not doing good in grades, it doesn't mean you're not a bad student or that you don't have any potential or anything. Just like you said, it's going to be subjective. Everyone's going to be different. And it's like, how do you go about treating that individually when you have an entire classroom to teach, And honestly, personally, for me, I can't answer that. I know that there are some teachers in this community. I know that they might be able to chime in at some point, whether they see this or listen to it somewhere. I would love to hear opinions from teachers and stuff like that, especially the difficulties. That's a whole different level of ballpark. But I can tell you from my experience, one teacher specifically that to this day had a massive impact on me was Mrs. Saminsky. She was my English teacher. And the way she went about teaching was, it was unique. It was very
unique.
It's like, but the thing is like, I don't know about you, because you had her too. It's like she wasn't even really trying. Like, actually, like learning was literally second, like the second thing that she was prioritizing. It wasn't the main focus. She generally put a focus on like understanding you as the individual. She put a focus on like getting to know you as a human. Not just, oh, you need to do this, we need to have these test scores. And as a result, I've never had such a great experience from teaching. And like when it was time for us to get down to it, she's like, okay, it's time to get into it. And you're like, you're right. No, I respect you. I respect you as a teacher, as a human being, for caring for me. And I was just ready. And like, okay, I'm speaking for myself, but that was the entire classroom reaction, Yeah. What about you?
It's true. Man, well, Miss Saminsky was a blessing. I've also had Miss Langley, but in my other homeschool, my other high school, I also had Mr. Holmes, Drew Holmes. He was a teacher, a CAD drafter that taught me drafting and ACIT. All of them share the same thing when it comes to teaching. They respect you as a person.
Amen.
And they prioritize their relationship with you as student teacher. And they will do anything in their power to make sure that you understand the material. It's not about trying to get the lesson out as fast as possible. It's about, are you getting it? And if not, that's okay. Speak up. They excelled in that. That was just
love that.
That's all that they were.
And that's to me is the same way that Mrs. Saminsky was. Like, of course we still had to take tests. Yeah, we still had to do things and stuff like that. And why we're talking about this specifically is because like I personally feel, in my opinion, that when someone comes from a broken household, they're going to be looking for that guidance somewhere else, whether they see it, whether they consciously are aware of it or not. And I feel like the immediate, influence is school and teachers in the school. And, and sometimes a lot of teachers don't know it, but they are being the parent of kids. They're giving them hope, pushing in positive directions. And, I definitely think that, we need more of that. And I just think that the whole mentality behind failure is just, it's so different, and it's like, okay, so what do we do? What do we do now? And it's like, where do we go from here? How can we end up at a better place is the next question, because sure, it's one thing to restructure failure. We can sit here, bounce back and forth ideas, talk about experiences, but it's like, at the end of the day, if someone's watching, at the end of the day, how can they apply this, you know? And I'm going to start. If you have anything you want to say, you can follow. But for me, I think the one thing that helped is to realize that the reality of of situations in general, like life experiences, things that we're going to experience in our life, you know, for me was real big when I accepted that there's just so much out of my control. So much out of my control. Yeah. Like, there are things that are so much out of my control that can make me feel like a failure, even though I had nothing to do with it, you know, the outcome rather. And kind of allowing myself to be more submissive to that, or not submissive, that's not the word, kind of, I guess, to just let go of that control for life in general and focus on the things that I can control, which are my attitude, my mentality, what I do moving forward, you know, how can I, and again, you know, eventually I developed that mentality of how can I learn from this, but really started by just focusing on what I can control. And I realized no matter where I go, I can control my attitude. I can control my mentality. And that's a lot easier said than done. I do no way, shape, or form want to downplay this and make it sound like, okay, cool, I just flip a switch and do it. No, like you're taking, you know, for some of you guys watching or listening, you're taking an entire lifetime of wiring and rewiring it. You're changing it. That's going to take time. You're going to fail, quote unquote, using quotations here, fail, you know, a lot of times, you know, and that's where like also giving yourself grace and understanding, again, the reality of the situation, you know, so releasing control and accepting the reality of situations, you know, that nothing's going to be perfect. You're not perfect. We are not perfect. No one is perfect. Only God can be perfect. Is, you know, like that's the way that I saw it. And that really helped me drastically understand that I just need to kind of step back, you know?
Yeah. Essentially, that's all that it is. You have to put your ego aside and allow things to just sounds weird, but allow things to just enter into you. Allow all that knowledge to just come to you rather than trying to force yourself to focus so hard. Because while you're focusing on one thing, you're missing out on so many other different things. That was my problem. The reason why I was a bad test taker, the reason why I was hard on myself with all my failures, is because I focused on it so much, trying to figure it out, trying to solve it like a math equation. It had to be solved. Take the time to breathe, you know. And I don't know if this is like an anxiety related thing for me or not, but it's just like relax. Okay, you messed up, and that's the thing that we were talking about before.
Though. It's so
difficult. Yeah, like you said before, this is a lifetimes of experience, just like put into one little segment. It took years for me to understand something like this because that was my biggest flaw with my failures. Anytime I failed,
you almost kind of have to be selfish with it too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have to recognize that you can be, and that's okay.
Right.
Because for me, I had no clue I could do that.
And then, like, what we mean by selfish, guys, we don't mean like, you know, you decide to hoard all the cookies in the house and fight everyone off. Like, these are my cookies, my cookies.
I like cookies.
More like selfish in the terms like, here's the thing. None of anything that we talk about doesn't matter if you don't take yourself into consideration. Now, granted, the things that we share, we're just one blip in the hundreds of thousands of different ways to fix yourself, or to not fix yourself, but rewire yourself and change your life, your trajectory and everything. There's so many different ways. This is just our experiences, of course, right? But at the end of the day, it really is important to like realize that you need to be selfish and think about yourself. Put yourself first. Because if you don't put yourself first in life, in any single aspect, you are going to fail. Because you can't help someone else. It's like that saying goes. We talked about this briefly again in a previous podcast. You need to learn to love yourself before you can love anyone else. Again, I hated that, but it's true because it's like you just don't know like true love until you accept the love for yourself, where you realize, wow, I am a deeply flawed individual, but I'm okay with that because those flaws make me who I am. Those flaws make me a great person. I can share experience, you know, and it sounds a little like, okay, you're just kind of full of yourself, slow down, you know what I mean? But like, this isn't something that you're talking, unless you're us. It's not something, you know, it's not something that you obviously talk about unless you're us, because we're talking about it in the podcast. But generally speaking,
Yeah.
it's like an internal dialogue, but you have to like really put yourself first.
True.
If I
Very, very
if I can kind of bring this on, it's funny that we're talking about this. I was watching a sermon online, and it's a relationship goal segment, and it helped me realize one thing. I struggle because even though I'm in a relationship, my mind was still in the single mentality, because I never moved on from that. And what I mean, but I'm not saying I was going around being unfaithful. That's not at all what I'm saying. But meaning that I was still in the independent mindset instead of like being together, And that's an example of where focusing too much on just yourself is like, can be a problem, because that can create friction in a relationship, But what he was talking about is like, people also greatly underestimate the power of being single. He's like, because when you focus on yourself, you can have a solid foundation that someone else can't shake. That, when life throws something at you, it can't knock you down. And I think that especially when you're getting in a relationship, like, you need that, because there will be rough times in relationships. There's going to be struggles all the time. And like, you can't get past those things, in my personal opinion, without being selfish and focusing on yourself. Because at that point, not only are you doing yourself a disservice, you're doing your significant other a disservice, or anyone around you a disservice,
Yeah. So it kind of becomes like an avalanche that just destroys everything.
Exactly. So it's like, and that's the way that we mean selfish, And like, as you said, you can certainly, share your experiences, because you kind of had to be over the past couple years,
Yeah. So I had to learn how to be selfish much later on in my life than I probably would have wanted to. But again, just kind of on a side tangent, when so like, when you understand, or when you're being told, hey, kind of prioritize yourself a little bit instead of other people. When someone has that kind of dialogue with you, the listener, really absorb that in. And I can't tell you how many times being selfish could have saved me a lot of heartache. Now, do I regret the things that I went through? Absolutely not. It was, failures. It was a valuable lesson that I learned that I needed to go through. I can't be hard on myself for the route that I took in the past to get here. Technically, the past doesn't exist anymore. So I can't really hold that over my head anymore. I have to accept that. And I think that's something that goes along with failure. With failure should come acceptance. That's something that you have to apply. You have to accept that failure. But side tangent aside, when you learn how to be essentially loyal to yourself,
that's a better way of putting that. That's definitely a better way of putting that.
When you learn how to be loyal to yourself and stay true to who you are, what is that, Shakespeare? To thine own self be true. You're able to, like, when we talk about it in the previous podcast as well, you're able to discern what you want, what you don't want. But through that, you're able to understand acceptance and tolerance. Tolerance is a big thing. For me, I learned that probably maybe 5 to 6 years ago, how to truly be tolerant with myself about the failures and mistakes that I've made, or even the mistakes that I thought I made. Some may say that not finishing college is a big failure or is a big mistake. Others would say, yo, dude, we support it because it's all scam anyway. It's to each his own, honestly. So when you think of something as a failure, learn to be tolerant with yourself. Learn to be accepting of, hey, it's just something that didn't make it. And don't put yourself down like kind of the traditional style of kind of raising children where they use a lot of fear tactics. It was a valid thing back then, but back then. Now let's start being accepting of, that we are human.
Right.
There's only so many perfect things that we can do, and there's not a lot.
That's a very small list.
Yeah, but that's also kind of the beauty of being human as well, because if you did everything perfect every single day, you wouldn't really learn as much, because you learn 1,000 times more with failures than you do with a success.
I agree.
You want to feel like you're growing. So coming full circle with this entire long tangent. So all right, I don't know. I feel very comfortable talking about this.
There's not wrong with
When
it.
it comes to you just have to be tolerant. You have to tell yourself it's okay. I messed up. And that's fine. Own it. There's that scene in Suicide Squad with Harley Quinn. It's just own it.
Yeah.
That's you. You did it. There's nothing wrong with that as long as you progress growing instead of sulking and reliving the past over and over. That doesn't get anywhere.
Right.
No, own it. Grow. Move on.
I think, first of all, that was beautifully said. Appreciate you. I agree with you on that. I think one thing that can also help a lot of people as well too that are struggling with just accepting it and stuff like that. Instead of accepting it, if it's not helping you, when you fail, take a moment, take a deep breath, really focus on your breath, and see how far you've accomplished or how far you've gotten in the things you've accomplished. You know what I mean? Because like 9 times out of 10, a lot of us can sit there and say we're not in the same place that we were a year ago. And most of us have grown and moved to a better place. That's not always the case. I know that, but that's also could be a blessing in disguise, because sometimes you can realize, wow, I really lost my ways by seeing where you've gone or where you were and where you're at. Or you can also slip back and look at it and be like, holy crap, a year has changed, and this is what we've accomplished in a year. What I've accomplished, what I've been able to do, what I've been able to change. A year doesn't sound like a long time, but it's about that compound effect. And will you be surprised the things that you can do a little bit at a time, one step at a time, and the difference that you can make and just taking things one day at a time. And again, especially when it comes to rewiring anything that you've been that you've already known, an entire lifetime worth of memories or habits, because we are creatures of habits, like that's going to take time. That's going to be a long while. You're going to have to keep pushing through that little by little. You're going to have to keep putting different, it's just, and you're going to fail. You accept the reality, but to kind of come, right. But to kind of come full circle, really stop to see how far you've come as well. Because if chances are, if you're even like trying to work on your things and you're failing, you are probably someone that have made continuous positive movement in the right direction. And sometimes we lose sight of that. I use this entire brand and content as an example, and I have people that part of our team that I'm surrounded with that are fortunate enough that when I'm not capable of looking back and seeing how far I've come, they remind me of that. And now we dive into the importance of having good people around you when you quote unquote fail, because you'd be surprised the difference of caring people, whether that be family members, really good friends, it could be a teacher, someone that genuinely cares to see you succeed as a human being and has nothing but the best intentions for you, really can make a massive difference in changing your life for the positive as well, because they can be there. They can kind of redirect you back in the path. And if you are someone who, whether you're watching this and you're religious, go to your whatever religious guidance that you may need to set you back on that path. There's a saying, I can't think of it, the verse, maybe you might be able to, but it's like Matthew 7. It's called the golden gates, narrow gates, the narrow gates. And it says basically, walk through the narrow gates, for the gates to hell is wide and the road that leads to it is easy, and there are many who walk through it. For the gates to life are narrow and the road that leads to it is difficult, and there are very few people who find it. And you're like, well, what the heck does that mean? And what I'm saying is, sometimes you just have to take inventory. You have to look back at where you've been at and get back on that path, man. That path is a straight run, but there is so many different off ramps that you can take that can veer you off that path. But just as there is many off ramps, there's just as many on ramps as well too, and you can get right back on that path. And that can just be, again, seeking out, if you're a religious individual, that kind of spiritual guidance and helping build your faith up to someone that you trust that maybe is more mature in the walk of whatever religion you believe in, or whether it be a parent or a good friend or someone who just cares to see you succeed, and like that's, that it's probably that's like my go-to. If I can't just accept the reality of what's in front of me when I fail and it's that difficult to, I stop, take a deep breath, and I realize, give myself a little grace, and I need to realize how far I've come. And it's great to be able to do that. And not only that, this is something that you're always going to be able to kind of, once you kind of develop that habit, you'll be able to like activate it almost as you need it, like down the road. It's always good to be able to like look back, just for comparison. And it's not living in the past. We're not living in the past, but we're looking back of where we were and where we are now. And it's that comparison that just is great. I know we talked about a lot not comparing yourself to anything or anyone, but you should be comparing yourself to the person you were yesterday, not to the person you're going to be tomorrow.
Yes.
Compare yourself with the person you were yesterday with the person you are today. And that's why we always say, let's try to make today a better day than yesterday, because that's all we can do.
Now, I would like to add to something that you had said. Looking back on your accomplishments is great. That's a wonderful thing, and I'm not disputing that at all whatsoever. I just know from a different side of life that there is also people like me, speaking for me personally, people like me sometimes that are stagnant, that aren't moving, that don't have many accomplishments or any at all. And I could kind of hear them saying, well, what about me? I really haven't built anything. I would like to chime in and say, no progress is better than bad progress. I can't stress that enough. And this is what I mean by that. I'm not encouraging being stagnant and just not doing anything. Definitely, be better than you were yesterday. If you want to have some kind of plan, go make your plans. There's nothing wrong with that. What I'm saying is this. I would rather you, listener, stay at home, kind of do some shadow work, some mental to work out your personal
behind the scenes work, basically.
Yeah, I would rather you do the shadow work, the behind the scenes work, than to be a drug dealer, than to be a serial killer. And those may seem extreme, but if you think about it, those can be some very easy decisions to make in the spur of the moment. I would rather you look back on who you are and say, hey, I'm a good person. I may not have accomplished much, but I have value because I am not that, and that. And think of all the examples that you could think of that are bad examples and that you are not.
And I just want to chime in too. Again, we always like to be respectful to as many sides as we can be. This is not to say for the people that, have only known violence and drug dealing, gang related, that we're trying to put you guys down in any way, shape, or form. You are a product of the only thing that you've ever known. That's not what we're saying. But obviously, we know those things aren't a legal thing. They can put you behind bars. They can, stop your life and stunt your basically the growth that you can be and the potential that you can be as a human being. Could isolation work for you? Maybe it could. It could be good for you. I don't know. Everyone's different. But that's not to say that we're putting those people down, because we know that it's not that easy, especially when you come from a place where survival is essential and you're in continuous survival mode. As you said, in the spur of the moment, you do what you need to do to survive.
Yes, definitely. What about the impact of shame as it relates to failure? And that is a wonderful question. If you don't mind me, I'd like to elaborate.
Because I have some things I'd love to say as well too.
About the impact of shame as it relates to failure, I will now be speaking to two sets of minds. One that is new and pursuing life, their dreams, and very young and gung-ho.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also talking to those that have experienced life, experienced failure, experienced hardships. For the people that are already in life, for the people that already been there, done that, been hurt, cheated on the whole 9 yards, for the people that already know what life's all about.
They've seen the dark side of life.
Yeah, I'll be talking to you guys first. Since, like me, we've already been there to a certain extent, again, subjective, maybe some people have been there further than I have, and that's fine. What we need to do is take the time to get our minds right. We have to understand acceptance in order to disintegrate the impact of shame due to our failures, because we grew up with you failed.
Mm-hmm.
We grew up with that heavy hand. We grew up with the slings and the arrows. We grew up with the shame, the guilt, the disrespect in some cases. the backlash on the mental stability of us due to what we have messed up. What we need to do is we need to learn to let go of that emotion. Not saying it's easy, but we don't do this like John F. Kennedy had said. We don't do this because it is easy, but because it is hard. Because oftentimes the best thing in life needs to be hard worked for.
A perfect example of that. Let's look at a beautiful flower.
Yes.
It is literally surrounded by crap and nothing but dirt.
Yep.
And eventually, if you nourish it right, and you give it sunlight, you give it what it needs, and in this case, it would be doing your work behind the scene, taking care of your mind, and really feeding your mind and growing behind the scenes at your own time. Little by little, it sprouts, and it breaks the surface, and you get your bright moment in the light, you know?
Yep. Beautiful metaphor. Beautiful metaphor.
Thank you.
The water for that flower is the mental security for us. We are the flower. The water is the mental security. We need to learn to be tolerant, accepting, and easy on our minds, because we've already known what failing is. Now, I said I was talking to two different
mindsets.
Mindsets. Now I'm going to talk to the people who haven't. Maybe you just graduated college. Maybe you're still in college. Maybe you just graduated high school. I'm talking to you guys now. The new guys, the new kids on the block, paving their own way. I'm talking to you guys. You have to recognize that no matter what you've been through, there's going to be a point in time where you fail. You might know this, you might not. Learn that that's going to be okay. You actually have an advantage because your minds are still in that process of almost like hyperactive learning because of college or high school. You're like a block of cedar, and you're carving the crap out of that. You're going to town on it. You're making yourself.
You have the tools in your own hand.
Yeah. So reinforce your mind by being easy on yourself whenever you fail a test, whenever you don't get a job. You know, whenever whenever a business says, "Don't call us, we'll call you," and never calls. Maybe when your friends move away and you feel like maybe I did something wrong, or be easy on yourself. Just take a break, breathe a little bit, relax. That'll benefit you in the long run. Mm-hmm. I would say, my personal experience, take up meditation. I know it might sound a little new age, but I guarantee you, a little bit of meditation, because hey, let's break it down. What is meditation? Meditation ultimately is taking time to silence your mind. It's easier said than done, but you're taking that time to just allow yourself to kind of just zone out, like how you do it in class. Yeah, it's just like
I don't know, man. So do you think that definition of meditation? I feel like that's a little subjective, because if I'm gonna be honest with you, for me, meditation is slightly different. Meditation is the time and place in which I take full control of my mind as much as I am capable of.
I would call that advanced meditation. That's good though. Yeah. Meditation, there's a couple of steps, but with meditation, it's just at the soul level. Mm-hmm. It's just training yourself to just shut off, because when you're new, you kind of have all these thoughts racing. At least for me, maybe other people are different, but for me, I always had these thoughts racing. So meditation for me was just turn the volume down. Mm-hmm. And then the next step, like you said, is learning to harness the power of my mind and to control my body, control my surroundings, control my energies, what I do with other people, how I interact with other people.
Thank you for sharing this perspective, because I'm in no way, I have nothing to disagree with that, but it's interesting because I have something else to add to that. Not really, I guess for me, this is why I like this. This is why I like having you on here, because we bring so many different perspectives, because that's actually, what you brought, it's not something that I honestly really thought about. And for me, this is my experience. So to answer the question, what about the impact of shame that as it relates to failure? So here's the way that I see that. The way that I understand that question and the way that I processed it basically was ultimately comes down to this. You just care too much of what people think about you. That's the biggest problem. I feel like shame most of the time comes when you are, without conscious effort, comparing yourself or caring about what other people are putting towards you. As you guys, I've talked about to you guys about this before. I was going to school for engineering. I was actually almost done my engineering degree. I had like about a year and a half left before I decided I want to stop. Through that entire process, I told you guys that I was obviously, working on myself and stuff like that. But nonetheless, I came to the conclusion that I was searching or pursuing engineering for the wrong reasons. So I did what 95% of adults do not. Actually, I'd say probably 99% of adults tell you not to do. And I dropped out of college. And I'm going to use that kind of loosely because I will be going back to college, but just for what I want to go to college for the right reasons. But nonetheless, I wouldn't have been able to make that choice. And if I cared about what other people felt or thought about or what their opinions were or the looks that they're going to give me. Because I feel like shame is like a lot for me, the way that I see shame anyways, it's like not even shame that you put on yourself, because it's like shame it's a feeling that's influenced through the judgment of other people is the way that I see shame, right? And for me, because the way that the minute that you throw that on yourself, I call that an insecurity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know if those are the actual definitions. That's just the way that my mind works. So for me, I often think that, okay, the impact of shame as it relates to failure means to me instantly says that you're just caring too much of what other people think about you or because we have this I want to say standard is what I'm gonna call it. You go to school, you get good grades, you go to college, you get good grades, you get a nice job, paying job, you get married, you buy the house, you have kids, and you continue that cycle and you raise them, raise your kid rather. I said raise them. You raise but you there's this kind of like quote unquote black and white mold that society wants us to fit in. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. No way, shape, or form. And if that's something that you truly want because that's what you chose to do and that's the route that you decided to go down, not that anyone else put on you and you feel it's the right thing to do it. I'm not judging in any way, shape, or form. But the reality of it is that not everyone is meant for that route. Not everyone is meant to go down that path, right? And especially if you're at a certain point in your life where you kind of feel like you're stalling and you're like, it's funny because I actually just recently experienced this. I feel like at my age, man, there's people buying houses. They already have kids. They already get married. And I'm like, where's my time? I'm about to be 27 years old. Granted, do I have my own place? Yeah. Have I learned a lot? Yeah. But I just feel like there's more. But it's like, I'm getting married at my pace, on my time frame. And that's like really what's important is that you do things on your time frame. So many of us say like we have like this artificial timer in our mind also where we feel like we need to get things done by a certain time, not only because society feels or it kind of like lays this standard, but because I think we also have like this internal time where we feel like we need to do something because maybe it's influenced because your parents did this at a certain age or, especially my fiance, for example, her mom had both of them or not both of them rather, but had kids, her first kid, I think at the age of 25. And I think her mom did that as well. Did something along the lines of everyone has kids by 25. And I was like, okay, well, you're 3 years younger than me. We can't do that. And I was like, 2. I was like, I'm not going to sit here and bring a kid to this world that it didn't ask to be in a world that is not ready for a kid to be in. Now, is it different if you have an accident and it wasn't planned? Completely different scenario. At that point, you do what you got to do. We step up to the plate and we adapt to overcome because we're adaptive human beings as well, or creatures rather. So, but to kind of circle this back around, I just really feel like when people feel any kind of shame, it's often because they care way too much of what other people think about them, what they do, and what their life looks like. Many of us live our life with trying to almost get acceptance from someone that we don't even like care or we don't even know. We'll waste money, time. Time is the biggest thing. We waste time. Oh.
Yeah. Probably the most scariest one too.
Right. And
get that back.
Yeah, exactly. Money's one thing, to lose money. I mean, I'm not saying that anyone likes to lose money, but time, that's something that you can't get back at all, and I definitely personally for me to bring back on that is I just feel like maybe if I was in that situation and I was asking that question, ask myself, do I care what other people think? And but like, and it's not one of those things where you just ask it and you might know the answer to it, but really think about it. And most importantly, be honest with yourself with the answer. Like you have to like have a very, very honest conversation to make sure that that's not the situation. Because if it is the fact that you are letting yourself feel shame because you feel as though some kind of pressure or whatever, whether it be from society, family, or like a failure in regards to, or not a failure, but shame in regards to your failure, you need to realize that something needs to change within yourself. Because I can sit here and every single one of you watching and listening, I can't control anything of how you guys feel? Do we try to be as understanding and as open-minded and respectful as possible? Absolutely. We're not trying to pass judgment. That's not what we're trying to do. And sometimes we joke, because we are gamers at heart. And gamers, I will be the first person to tell you, I can be toxic as a gamer. But it's all a joke and love and fair. Like, what is that? All joke and love and war, or whatever the saying goes.
Fair and love and war.
There you go.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, I can't control anyone that's watching, listening, that comes across my content. Someone can absolutely be offended by the most family-friendly content, and that's the reality of it, And it's just you're basically giving that power to someone else if if that shame is coming because of an external force, and that's a good thing at the same time, because then you also have the power to change that. It's a realization of the power. You've given it to someone else, but at any time in your life or any point, you can take it back, and that goes back to what we were saying. If that's the situation, you're going to have to work little by little to really focus on changing that mentality and developing that power and getting it back into your own hands, over time. It's going to be something that's going to be overnight, but there are some of you that are watching that are very capable human beings that can genuinely apply something almost overnight. They begin doing it, they're conscious about it, and God bless you, because I consider that a superpower.
Yeah, that's big W. Seriously, not everybody could do that.
And then so Tristan says that I didn't know this then, but I think I had issues accepting I was human, still struggling with accepting my flaws. That's a difficult one. I mean, I honestly, for me, I can tell you as someone who was at one point fit, I had, I've said this before, and I would say that from an external perspective, I looked ideal is what I'm going to say. And this is only one type of flaws. There's obviously many, many types of flaws. We're not just talking about body insecurities. There's also, mental obstacles that we face that we consider flaws, or habits that we haven't broken and stuff like that, and stuff like along those lines. But just to kind of use as an example, I feel that it really depends on what the flaws are. And for me, it was definitely body image. I felt that at a certain point that, I was very slim. I was a skinny kid. I mean, I was literally in I was like a junior before I started lifting, and I weighed like 105 pounds, literally. That's light. That is light. That's light. The wind blows, I'm gone, that's how light I was. And I started packing on weight because of body insecurity and stuff like that. Now, granted, I was obviously on an unhealthy level weight, but now I'm at a healthy weight. I sit at 135, sometimes 140, kind of go into either back and forth. For my height, that's a healthy weight. But nonetheless, I stopped lifting, and I obviously lost everything and stuff like that. That's just basically also, in my opinion, is just, in terms of body images, is comparison. It's a comparison thing where, especially in the online world, you are literally having instant access to some of the world's most beautiful people naturally. Yeah. No shame to anyone who wants to get plastic surgery done or anything like that, but there are a lot of natural beauty out there. And it was easy for me to compare myself to those people. It really was, but at the end of the day, you just also have to teach yourself to stop comparing, because everyone is different. It's about, this goes back to, again, on previous podcast episode, you really have to understand yourself. You really have to understand yourself and learn to define the definition of what those flaws may be, by you defining them, by not allowing someone else to define them, and that's really how you learn to accept them. Beauty is beauty, regardless. Everyone looks different. Everyone looks different inside and out, but there is someone for everyone out there, whether that be friendship or relationships or anything, so I don't know. Do you have anything to say about that? I'll read it back to you, but it says, I didn't know this, but I think I had an issue accepting I was human. I was still struggling and accepting my flaws.
I know that all too well, honestly. And I do have a lot to add to that, actually, because, 110% correct to Brian, because it's all just true. When it comes to, I'm gonna get back to that real quick. I forgot how it was put, but I had seen somewhere, and for the life of me, I can't remember where I saw it, but it should be a crime to cause someone else to doubt their own inner voice. And I think that's where the expectation things come from, whether by choice or by growing.
You don't mean a literal crime, right? Or you just mean that
No.
Okay, I'm gonna say.
what I'm saying, it should be a crime
Oh,
to
gotcha. Like, yeah.
cause someone else to doubt their own inner voice. And here's why. Here's why I say this. When you cause someone to doubt their own inner voice, it's a fight or flight mechanism that automatically pops up. They either fight against it and they take who they are and they stick by it, or like a lot of people nowadays, they cave in. And that's where kind of expectation comes from. For me, there was parental expectation where there really wasn't any fight or flight. It was just, okay, if I make them happy, I will be happy. And that was my definition of happiness. But that's not right. It's great to make your parents happy, yes. But when you're establishing your life, when you're establishing who you are,
Your
when you're trying to
identity.
yes, when you're trying to figure out your own identity, great word, you have to then be selfish. And whether you placed expectations or they happen to manifest over time, like parental expectations or maybe relationship expectations, you need to identify that. You need to take the time to identify any expectations that you might feel that you owe to someone else. I mean this with the best intentions as possible. Then at that point, you need to stop because you don't owe anyone anything emotionally, mentally, physically. You don't.
You owe it
And
to
that
yourself.
takes so yeah, but you owe it to yourself to understand that you don't owe anyone else anything. And that's hard because the expectation thing.
What about,
It's so hard.
let me chime in and interrupt you. What about in regards to parenting? Because you owe something to your kids to be the best version of yourself. But for me, the way that I see it, like looking back at it, I love my mom to death, love her dearly. But I would have almost wished that she was selfish in taking care of herself so she can then take better care of us. Not that she took bad care of us in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, we definitely.
What are you asking?
Huh?
Wait, so then what are you asking?
Because like there are parents that are there are some people who are parents and they're like,
Yeah.
I owe a lot to my child,
Yes.
and I guess I want to more, elaborate on that. Do you agree or disagree that they should put their child first, or are you on the same boat with me where you feel like, yes, you can put your child first, but how can you put your child first if you can't put yourself first?
Let me start by saying, if you have a child, if you are a single parent, or if you're a co-parent, happily married or not, if you're a parent in general, you then owe everything to your child. Your life becomes your child's life. Just want to get that out there. No ifs, ands, or buts. That's just my take on it. Whether it was planned, whether it was surprise, doesn't matter. That child is now your
Surprise,
responsibility.
mother. No, I'm just kidding.
That's just the way I see it, and I know that there are circumstances revolving around how maybe you became a parent for everyone. And no hate, all
No
respect in the
judgment
world.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no judgment. All I'm saying is I truly believe that then there is an expectation that you should place on yourself to be responsible for that kid.
It's a difficult one to answer.
I'm trying to think of how to word it because going off of your second point of what you had said before, how can you love someone else if you can't even love yourself? I understand that phrase, and I don't want to sound contradictory because I do support it. You have to love yourself first. But at the same time, I truly feel it is possible to truly love someone while not loving yourself, because that was me in my previous relationship. And going into expectations and feeling like you owe something to the child, I feel even though you don't have anything inside of you, maybe revolving around the parenting handbook, because none of us get one, but it's kind of just a trial run. Oh my gosh, I'll be first in line. I know nothing about this. I need help. But I truly feel that it is possible to learn how to be a good parent for that child. And in that regard, I truly believe that everyone does have a responsibility to be there for their child. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it does, and to, I to kind of go back on the love yourself, you can't really love someone until you love yourself. I'm actually going to go back, and this is going to sound contradictory for any of you guys who've actually heard our previous podcast. And I think a better way to word this, I agree with you. You can love someone even though you don't love yourself. But I don't think you can love into the best of your abilities if you don't know how to love yourself. That's my personal opinion. You can disagree with that.
I would have to disagree because my own personal experience, I love that girl to death, but I hated the man that I became because of the relationship. And I knew that probably year 3. And I was in the relationship for 5 years. I saw myself turning into someone that I just did not want to be, but her, I loved her with every fiber of my being. and not just for looks. It wasn't something superficial that, oh, I loved her because of her family, or that. No, I genuinely loved who she was.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even care about myself, but I still had a sense of understanding okay, this is a great way to put it. I loved her the exact way that I wanted to be loved, which is why I say, even though you may not truly love yourself, I still think you can definitely love someone else. According to...
I mean, honestly, I think at the end of the day, realistically speaking, we're both right and we're both wrong, because I think at the end of the day, this is a very subjective, thing. I'm only, for me specifically, of course, you're speaking from your experience, I'm speaking from mine. I know that I love my fiance to death, but I can tell that I never really allowed myself to love her the best way that I could, because there was things that I was holding within myself. I didn't really truly learn to love myself, right? And that, like, there was like, it's gonna sound stupid the way that my mind sees it. It's like I just unlocked this new level once I loved myself, and like we moved on to that, and it's kind of like the way that I see it, which isn't always the case, but generally speaking, in a healthy relationship, and you have a kid and you guys are excited and it's like, oh my God, I love you so much more. Then it's like, I feel like that's like a next level of unlocking. Maybe that's a really ass backward way of saying it, but I do agree with you as well, though, that you can love someone and you love them the way that you would like to be loved. But I guess the way that I see that is like, that's not always healthy love. You know what I mean? Because then we get into the whole love language things and stuff like that. And you're basically loving them the way that you would want to be loved, but that doesn't mean that it's going to work for them, Exactly. And that's, I guess, kind of like, it's difficult, because you know what I'm saying, but it's so difficult to word in a way to get the point straight across, and it's like without using, so it's hard. It's difficult. Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
Describe, be like, I didn't know how to love myself, but I knew how I wanted to be loved. Mm-hmm. So I loved her. But the way that I want to be loved and someone else wanted to be loved weren't the same. May not be the same, may be the same. I would say, instead of loving yourself before love someone else, I would say love, but make sure you love yourself first, because then love will be easier.
That's a good way of putting it. I like that. Understandable. Epiphany Stick in the chat says, in my experience, I love my ex so much, but I barely love myself. Because of that, I couldn't be as honest with both myself or her, and as a result, I couldn't give her all the love I had in my heart. I feel I had been more self-loving. I could have been more confident and showed a different side. Well, now we're getting, I just genuinely, did I hear love or wait, did you, okay, so Hugopolis in the chat said, did you love her, or did you love the idea of loving her? Ooh,
talking to me?
Oh, but wow, that's a different question to ask, because that question could be asked to you, Bub. Did you love her, or did you love the idea of loving her?
I think, to answer that honestly, and I will always be honest, I think I loved the woman that I saw. That doesn't necessarily mean I saw her for who she was.
Love is blind.
In some cases, yeah. And I didn't know it, but we didn't really match up. Was she a great best friend? Oh my gosh. I can honestly say I wish we were still friends. She was a great best friend, but I think I loved the idea of being with her rather than who she was. Not to say that she was a bad person. We just didn't really align in the ways that I thought we did.
Right.
Yeah.
That's understandable.
Like seeing things and like a square peg into a circle hole. It
wasn't fitting. You can try, and we kept trying for a few years. It just wasn't working. That's understandable. Yeah. That is such a deep question. I like that question a lot. I personally, I know that this is restructuring failures, what this episode is about and everything, but honestly, I just really love talking about this. So we are at the 1 hour mark. So we're going to go ahead and call this not a stream, a podcast. So we're going to do a little bit of an outro here, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you are watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe and turn on notifications if you like this kind of content. If you're watching on the podcast on Spotify, don't forget to check out our website, thinktheorypodcast.com. If you want to show some support, you can also submit some topics there as well, guys. Love you guys, and don't forget to inspire, lead, and motivate, and let's make today a better day than yesterday. Catch you all next podcast.